this morning I went and had coffee at 6:30 at this local coffee shop, and there was a woman in there who just came back from Central Park, and she had this leaf. It's fall. It was this big, right?
Oh my goodness.
And she was like just marveling at this leaf, and I looked at her, and she was so blissful about a leaf at 6 o'clock in the morning. And I said, that's a beautiful leaf.
Pre-coffee.
And she said, I know. Happiness is such a buzzy topic. Like, we're always sort of like, how do I get happier? How do I make this better? I think that part of it's a choice, and part of it is, you know, this accepting where we are and all that stuff you guys have said. But I also think there's something that we physically do to ourselves that set ourselves up on a daily basis to bring happiness in, whether that's contentment or possibilities through hormones and energy or whatever, to be able to have happiness. I think what's going on in our body is very meaningful to our emotional experience. I think we should talk about that.
Oh, well, that's, you know, in my most recent book, because I've been doing this 40 years, and what I find is you can do the good psychological work, and we have to all do that. We can lead a good life. But I see so many people doing that, and yet still they'll feel depression, there's a lack of happiness, there's chronic anxiety, sometimes they don't sleep well. It's about nutrition as well. It's about lifestyle. Is that our lifestyle balanced? Are we getting enough time for ourselves to relax and do things we enjoy doing, as opposed to always being there for others, which is just as important? What are we putting in our bodies? And, you know, I just felt I had to write this book, which is on ADHD. Now, how does that have to do with happiness? Well, attention deficit disorder, the same condition that causes some children to be hyper bold, which is hyperactivity. Some children who are naturally creative become hyper creative, which makes them very disorganized all the time and then messy and so forth. Other children are sensitive types, and they take things very personally. And when you add ADHD to that, you become hypersensitive. And these people are such giving, loving people. But when you have this change that happens in the brain, and what causes that change? Something very, very significant. In the last 30 years, our lifestyle has changed a lot. We've sped everything up, and life is so much faster now, and speed is a major dopamine stimulator. That's what methamphetamines are, is speed. Our lives have become speed, stimulation, and our diet has matched that with things like sugar and junk food and caffeine and all these stimulants. What people don't realize is the more stimulated you are, the more you demand and need stimulants to be happy, but it's a very passing happiness, as opposed to being content and fulfilled and happy with what you have. We're rushing to more. We need more and more and more. And it really comes back to our diet, and our diet today is quite toxic quite often. Our diet today is nutritionally deficient. So we have to look at good quality foods, organic foods. And my belief, and why I wrote a whole book on this, is the supplements that I've seen to help children with ADHD, but couples with ADHD. Because we all have it to some degree if we're rushing around. And what people don't realize is when you're married, it shows up as, or as we're adults, it shows up as for women as being overwhelmed. That's the lack of focus on one thing. They're focusing on so many things and not themselves. And men tend to focus, they tend to have a hyper focus, where they forget all the other things in their life. One thing takes the full attention, and they miss life. You know, they get to their old age and they kind of go, oh my gosh, you know, I spent my whole life just focused on my work. What about my family, my children? I neglected that.
So our bodies really play a big role.
Our bodies play a big role.
Yeah.
Right. You even wrote about it in your book, didn't you?
I certainly
Which
did.
I loved.
I certainly did.
It was great. And it's one of the reasons why I started a meditation weekly telecall. Actually, people from all over the world call in. One of the things that I realized is that when I was working with my clients, they would be really happy during that 1 hour session that I would have with them. But in between, they would kind of lose it all. So I actually started a telecall. It's once a week called Miracle Mondays Meditation. And I found that the clients who did this practice of a spiritual practice every single day, they were able to hold their happiness from session to session, and then eventually they began to embody their own happiness. So there's something to be said about going inside, being still, and allowing yourself to be happy, but do it on a regular basis, as a practice, as a daily practice.
Daily practices are so important, rituals that we know we're going to do over and over that let us slow life down, and that's one of the most valuable ones.
Exactly.
sounds like it allows them to be centered and more mindful of their life and be more intentional in life, which is important when you want to create your own happy life.
Absolutely. It's a time to receive.
I often tell my clients to go spend time in nature.
Yeah.
And
Nice.
especially, you know, when I'm feeling a little bit down myself, I find that going to the ocean, and I just sit by the ocean. And anytime, you know, I spend time in nature, or I have my clients spend time in nature, it really shifts my energy, and I just feel more connected. And so it's been, you know, I find that's very, very helpful. I think people really have lost that piece.
Yeah.
You know, just slow it down and just spend a little time, even, you know.
Unplug.
Yeah,
Unplug.
exactly.
I think we need a sense that we're not the most important thing in the world.
Right.
And we need some sense that this morning, we're filming in New York, and this morning I went and had coffee at 6:30 at this local coffee shop, and there was a woman in there who just came back from Central Park, and she had this leaf, it's fall, it was this big,
Oh my
right?
goodness.
And she was like, just marveling at this leaf. And I looked at her, and she was so blissful about a leaf at 6 o'clock in the morning. And I said, that's a beautiful leaf.
Pre-coffee.
And she said, I know. I thought, you just made me happy. I made you happy. This is a happy moment. So, you know, I think what we're looking at with happiness is that it is a choice and it is a practice, right? And it's something, if people want to cultivate more in their lives, they have to pay attention to it every day, look at their bodies, look at what they're eating, how they're behaving, what their expectations are, and work on that again and again. There's no magic answer. You just have to practice.